This week on Rob's Camino, we are talking about flights. Coming right up, flying. So welcome back to Rob's Camino. This week I thought I would be talking about flights because there's been a few questions online about that recently. Apologies for the dress. I'm not looking very pilgrim-like. I'm in the office, so I was doing some business videos and thought I'd better catch up and do a Rob's Camino video. So this is going to be more relevant to those travelling longer distances, not so much for people travelling within Europe, although if you're flying it, there will be some relevance. But a lot of people travelling to Europe are coming from North America, South America, Australia, South Africa, and a lot of the questions I see online and some questions I've had recently have been around flight booking and that kind of stuff. So I thought I'd just talk a little bit about these long distance flights for a moment and some of the things that you might be concerned about. So I'm going to talk about where to fly to and from, how to work out your dates, the sort of ticket types, luggage issues, and some resources that might help you plan your flights, because we're planning ours. I think in about 2 weeks I'll be able to start planning our flights for our next Camino, and I'll explain why that's going to happen in 2 weeks' time. So some random things, and if you have any questions related to getting to and from the Camino, do comment down below. I love to get the questions. If you've been on the channel for a while, you know I love to talk about the Camino. My wife won't listen anymore, so I have to talk to someone about it. So if you ask lots of questions, it gives me a chance to talk Camino. And if there's particular video topics as well, do put those down below. So what are we going to talk about with flights? To and from. I think I mentioned this before, but in the context of flights, it's probably worth mentioning again. I've seen a few online posts recently where people say, oh, you know, where should I fly into and out of and all the rest of it. It's simply a function of which Camino you're going to walk, really. If you're going to walk the Camino Francis, popular places to fly into are Madrid, Paris, less so Barcelona, I think. Paris is pretty easy to get down. If you're starting in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, Paris is quite good because you get the fast train, the TGV down to Bayonne, and then you get the train from Bayonne up to Saint-Jean. If you're flying into Madrid, you can get a train up to Pamplona. Getting from Pamplona to Saint-Jean is a little bit more complicated. I think there's one bus a day. You can get a taxi, which is quite expensive, so a lot of people try and club together on a taxi and that kind of stuff. I've gone via Paris a couple of times. Works great. Correct me down below if I'm guessing. I think it was about a 3-hour train trip from Paris down to Bayonne. A beautiful fast train, very comfortable. And then the train from Bayonne up to Saint-Jean, it's sort of timed to meet it. You know, I think 15-20 minutes between them. Once actually I did fly down to Biarritz because there was a rail strike. It does happen in France. And there was a rail strike on, and we were staying very close to Montparnasse railway station, Gare Montparnasse, which the TGV heads down south from there. And I said to Pat, oh, let's not risk it. You know, I think we were able to get a refund on our train tickets, and we flew down, I think, from Orly to Biarritz, and then travelled up from there using Express Bourriquot, which is a great service. So the to and from is, like I say, very much a function of where you're starting from. I noticed some people starting from Sarria recently, and they were saying, oh, you know, where do we fly into? I think Santiago is probably the accepted place, and you can get buses from there, as far as I know, to Sarria. On our next Camino, we're walking the Camino Madrid. Easy, we're going to fly into Madrid. We won't start walking in the city centre because it's pretty much, we don't like walking on roads much, but we'll start just outside the city. And hey, it's a couple of days in Madrid. Gotta love that. So the to and from, I've generally, I've got to think about this, I've generally flown out of the same city I've flown into. Not necessary, of course, although I have joined a couple of sort of airline forums recently, and the intricacies of ticketing and so on are interesting. So, for example, if I was going to fly into Paris and out of Madrid, my understanding is that that is probably more expensive than a return ticket to Paris. So to single tickets on different legs are probably going to be more expensive than a return ticket into the same port of entry and exit, if that makes sense. So all of this, do your own research, and I'll mention a couple of websites that I use quite a lot. One is Rome to Rio, Rome number 2 Rio, and literally you put in, I'm going from Sydney, Australia to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, and it will work out your route options. That's probably a bit of a tricky one because there's really only one option. You're going to fly to begin with. But if you were trying to work out how to get from Madrid airport to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, for example, you put that into Rome to Rio and it will give you train times and bus options, and that's a really interesting and useful tool to look at things. The other resource that I'll mention is Skyscanner. There are lots of others out there, but I use Skyscanner to look at flights. If you're going to be you're looking for cheap flights, Skyscanner is pretty good, and you can say, look, I want a direct flight, or I'm happy to have 1 stop or 2 stops. I'm starting to look now at flights to Madrid for our next Camino. So we're going Sydney to Madrid, and I'm lucky in that I earn lots of air miles, points and things through my work, so I try to use those for our flights. It does mean it's a little bit more restrictive. And so I'm starting to look now at options. So, I can go Sydney, where is it? Somewhere in Texas. Dallas, I think, or Fort Worth. I can do Sydney, Fort Worth, Madrid. My preference would be to do Sydney, Dubai, Madrid. It's a little bit quicker. So I'm kind of looking at options of flight sectors and things like that early on. And then as we get closer to the date, I can start looking at tickets themselves. So what about dates? Now, this is a very common question. How could you possibly book your return ticket before you even go? You don't know how long it's going to take. Good question. If you're walking a shorter Camino, obviously it's a little bit easier to probably plan. If it's a 7-dayer, you're not going to go much over 7 days or much under. It's a little bit easier to plan the fly in and fly out dates. For a longer one, my first one was about 40 days. The approach that I took, and I've talked about this on planning videos, so I won't go back over it too much, but I basically work out, what's my comfortable walking distance. Let's do a back of the envelope now so I can explain it. Let's say it's 20 k's a day, which it pretty much is. I'm going to walk from Saint-Jean. That's 800 k's, so that's 40 days walking. This is not necessarily how I would do it, but I'm going to allow 3 rest days, so we're up to 43. I'm going to arrive in Paris on one morning. I'm going to get the train down on the next, so I'm going to add 2 days up front for travelling to Saint-Jean. So from arrival in Paris to getting to Saint-Jean, there'll be a day in Paris to recuperate, a day travel down to Saint-Jean. And I'm probably going to allow 2 to 3 days at the end to unwind in Santiago and sightsee and whatever, get back to my airport for flying back. So it's probably going to be 45, 46 days. That's what I did on my very first Camino, and that worked out okay, actually. I don't think I had to change the return flight. Your option, of course, is to have a ticket type that allows date changes without too much of a penalty. So because we're generally using air miles or points, we can do that on most of the ticket types, but I think there's a $100 penalty or something for changing the date. But I've never had to actually change the date yet. I always allow plenty of time. And because we're coming from a long way off, coming from Australia, I generally do something else as well. So if I put a few days padding in there, it doesn't matter. Like on our next one, I've allowed a couple of days that we're going to go down to Porto. So if we were behind schedule, for example, I'd just chop out Porto. If we're ahead of time, we'll have a couple of extra days in Porto. Or I might go and visit my sister up in Bordeaux or something like that. So I generally plan in a little bit of extra time. Understandably, for a lot of people, you're on a tight time frame and you might not be able to do that. If that's the case, and you're planning, let's say, a 20-day block, you're going to fly in on day 1 and fly out on day 20, just be very careful about the distance that you're planning to walk, and be prepared maybe that you're going to have to sort of skip a day to keep on schedule or something like that. But if you've got plenty of time, the approach I use is just allow plenty of time. So that's how I work out the dates. And I actually, I don't know that there's any sort of set rule on this. I'd be very interested to hear your comments down below. But I've tried to research this recently to answer the question for myself, and that is how far out to book tickets. There is a train of thought which says the earlier you book, the better deal you'll get. There's a train of thought which says the nearer the flight date, the better discounts you'll get because they're trying to get rid of the seats. The research that I've done recently, and I've checked on airline forums, and I've even used AI tools to research it, the general rule that I'm picking up on, do your own research, is that the closer you leave it to the date of departure, the more you're going to end up paying. And that has certainly been my experience. So if that's not yours, jump in and say, hey, coming from North America, it doesn't work like that, or coming from wherever, do share your own experience. But mine has been that the earlier I book, the better in terms of the price, but also the seat availability. And that brings me back to why am I starting to look at seats in 2 weeks' time? Because all airlines have a process whereby they release seats a certain number of days ahead of the departure date. I'm probably going to get this wrong, but I think Qantas is 353 days ahead, just over a year. Or maybe it's 335, I forget. But it's roughly 12 months ahead. Emirates, for example, which we often use because it's a code share with Qantas, is, I think, 4 weeks less. So because I want to fly Sydney, Dubai, Madrid, using Qantas points on an Emirates flight, it gets complicated. You work out your own airlines. I can probably only book those seats about 11 months out. And so what I've been doing is some test bookings. I've been looking online to see if seats are available, and they're not available yet for our date. So I've been coming back 2 weeks, 4 weeks, and I go, there's lots of seats. And then, I know roughly where the sweet spot is. I'm going to have to book them probably 10 months out. And I'll get more choice of flights. So the later you leave it, you might have less choice of flights, less choice of seat, less choice of ticket type. I'm not going to try and explain ticket types. I once looked at that, and I think there are 14 different classes of airline tickets officially. If you think there are technically 4 classes, so fare types, there's economy, premium economy, business, and first in most international airlines. Within each, you've then got some sort of discount fare which doesn't allow changes, or you've got to pay to change. You've got flexi fares which allow change of dates. You've got all sorts of conditions that go around them, and I think there's about 14 different fare types within the 4 classes of travel. So that's why I can't really sort of say to you this is going to work, because it depends on your fare type and your class of travel and your airline and all that kind of stuff. But look into all of that. Traveling from a long way off has challenges. So that's the sort of dates and ticket types. A lot of people talk about luggage. I've got videos on the channel about luggage. I'll put links to those up here or down below. A couple of things I will just mention on luggage because it's come up recently on Facebook groups and things like that. I don't want to do a whole video on this again, but what are the key points? How big the luggage is. There's 2 aspects, what's in it and how big it is. So let's talk about how big it is. Our backpacks are small enough that we can use them as carry-on luggage on the airlines that we travel on. Every airline almost has different luggage restrictions. So as an example, Pat and I were thinking of doing just a bit of a tour of Europe, like a backpacking tour. We wanted to take only carry-on luggage so that we were not held up at airports, and it was easier just to jump on and off local planes in Europe and that type of thing. So I studied what the carry-on luggage restrictions were on all of the airlines that we plan to use, and most of them were discount airlines, and some of them are very restrictive. Roughly in terms of size, if you like, the free carry-on on some would be equivalent to a 20-litre backpack, but all of them allowed carry-on of a larger bag up to, I think it was about 40 litres rough size, obviously depending on the 3 dimensions. They have dimensional requirements as well, length, breadth, depth, check those. and that was paid carry-on luggage. So you might have a discount airline where you can get a little bag for nothing, but you can get a reasonable sized backpack by paying a few dollars more if you didn't want to check in luggage. So we always prefer to use carry-on. Look, I've never had luggage. I don't know how many times I've flown. Hundreds, probably 1,000. I don't know. My dad was an airline pilot. I was flying from the age of 2 probably. I've never lost luggage on a plane. But I do hear stories of people losing luggage. I prefer not to check in my stuff for 2 reasons. One, I couldn't afford to lose my backpack. There is stuff in there, some of my Camino gear that I cannot replace. You know, it's old stuff that's not made anymore, and I really don't want the hassle of having to replace them. So I'd rather have a carry-on bag. You know, it's just that the speed of getting through airports and things as well is just more convenient. So that's one aspect of luggage. The other aspect of luggage is what's in it. Do check the airline rules, the airport rules, and again, I've covered this in another video. People ask endlessly, can I carry hiking poles on a plane? I've got a video on it. Search the channel. The answer is yes and no. Some airlines will allow it. Some airports, it's also up to the airport security, will allow it. Some definitely won't. As far as I know, departing out of Santiago, they will not let you carry poles onto a plane. And that's the airport security. It has nothing to do with the airline. So do check into all of that. How do I get around that? I haven't got one here. I have a mailing tube and I put our poles in that. I put our liquids. Traveling internationally, you can't carry liquids above 100 millilitres. I put my pocket knife in there. I put a few little bits and pieces in that mailing tube, and I check that in. So if that gets lost, I'm not too concerned, and it gets over any sort of security issues that I might have. So that's luggage. Do check the individual airlines, measure your pack, all that kind of stuff. What have we covered? Flying in, which cities to go into, very much dependent on the route you're walking, the dates. I tend to book well in advance, 10, 11 months ahead. It gives me more flexibility. I don't think I end up paying more. You know, the ticket types, do check your ticket type and see the conditions for that ticket type. Can you change the dates? You know, what's your luggage allowance? Very specific around that. Luggage, do check. It's not just about weight. It's about length, width, breadth. You know, a lot of airlines have those luggage frames, and they'll say, you know, will your bag fit in that frame? And if it won't fit, you ain't carrying it on. And don't start having an argument with the gate staff. That's not going to end well. So do make sure that you're well within the limits. And remember those 2 websites that are very useful. Rome to Rio, R-O-M-E, letter 2, number 2, Rio, R-I-O, and Skyscanner, very useful for planning. So there we go. How are you going with your flights, planning your next Camino? I'm excited. I'll be booking mine in a couple of weeks for next year. So thanks for watching. If you enjoy these videos, do like, share, comment. It's not a commercial channel, as you know, if you've been on here for a while, but it helps spread the message. And if you find this video useful, others might too. So it helps to share. Thanks for watching. Any particular topics you want, comment down below and I'll point you to them. I might have covered it or I'll do a new video. Bye for now.